Welcome to the Library of Humanity. Today's kind of a quiet Saturday, and I'm thinking about who am I? And that question is relevant for anybody because everybody wants to know a little bit more about themselves. So we have to figure out exactly what we're looking for when we're looking for ourselves. Are we looking for the idea of ourselves, or are we trying to understand really at the root what we are? Like, what is the sense, the feeling of I am? Instead of like, I am this particular person, that as the idea, how do we go deep inside of ourselves and figure out exactly who we are without even a speck of doubt in our minds? Like, we go into ourselves and figure out, like, I know for sure that's who I am. And not, again, not the idea like, oh, I'm an extrovert, or I'm an accountant, or I'm 35 years old. Like these are ideas that we teach ourselves who we are. But if we're really, really honest, that's kind of the key is to be honest with yourself while going inside of yourself and figuring out that is who I am. That is who I am. And it's actually extremely familiar, very, very familiar, because it's who you have been your entire life. So that might sound kind of weird, but if you think about it, you have not been 35 years old your whole life. You have not been an accountant your whole life. You have not even been an extrovert maybe your whole life, right? These are ideas that kind of began at a particular place in your life as a human person. So a lot of our ideas of ourselves stem or come from the fact or the idea that we are a human person first and foremost. Okay, but today I want to challenge that idea of that the human being is the central point of your existence. So maybe it is the central point of maybe your life. And when you think of your life, you think of me as the human. But when you think of like the entire time that you have existed, like I mean your consciousness, your conscious awareness of, yeah, I am, like I exist. And if you try to remember when you were like 3 or 2 years old, or even maybe you can remember before that, that would be quite impressive. But that might be the essence that I'm talking about, is if you try to use your memory at this point, try to figure out what was that sense of I exist. What was that? I want to go back into before I had all of these ideas of myself, which was kind of been taught to you by society. So like you have been socialized into being like a citizen in this society by interacting with your family and friends and society in general. But when you go back into your sense of I am, what really is that? What is it? Because it seems like it's just conscious awareness from a particular point of view. Like I'm over here, right? It's like you are always here, and then the outside world seems to be out there, right? So there's here and there. So that's kind of one of the keys to understanding yourself as there's always a here. There's somebody here, right? Who is that? Who is that somebody that's always here? So it was here when you were 3 years old. It was here today. And it's going to be here at the moment of your death, the moment of you, the human person, dying. But what do you think is going to happen, right? Like, what do you think is going to be the difference between your consciousness dying and your consciousness being born, right? So when you're born, it feels like nothing existed before you were born. But really, let's try to be honest with our own consciousness and figure out what was it like before I had the sense of I am in this particular body, right? I am me. Before the idea of I am me, you had there was this existence that, albeit it was maybe black and felt like nothing, right? But that was your experience before you were born. And so I guess my challenge or question to you is that what we are going to return to? after we die, after our consciousness passes from this body, brain, mind kind of mechanism that I call Kyle and that society calls Kyle, or whatever your name is. So when you leave that sense of like identity, what is going to happen to your sense of I am, right? So we have your identity, which is like Kyle, right? But then you have the sense of I am, because I feel deeper. The I am is deeper than Kyle. It's like Kyle, the whole life of Kyle like occurs inside of this like awareness that was never born and perhaps won't even die, right? It's that black nothingness that is like the background to everything that I have experienced as Kyle. And even like my thoughts in my mind or the people I meet, these are all aspects of this like black conscious nothingness. So it is weird how this sense of awareness before we were born and perhaps after we die, like it seems like it's nothing, but it's also like conscious though. So it's kind of interesting how it's nothing yet it is conscious. Another point in our lives that we've experienced this is in between our dreams. So if you try to be honest with your awareness right now and you try to remember, what is it like in your awareness when you are in between dreams, or when you are just falling asleep? So you no longer are awake, right? Because awake, it feels like, okay, I'm aware and I'm here. But when you fall asleep and deep sleep, right, in between dreams here, then it seems like there's like this black nothingness again. Yet it's like conscious. It's like, it's not dead. Dead is, the opposite of life. But then the opposite of existence would be like non-existence. So those are a little different, right? So it's like, it's existing as nothing. Or like nothingness is how our awareness exists when Kyle or isn't here. Or like when Kyle isn't being seen or sensed by the consciousness. So that would be pretty obvious, or I guess I'm kind of demonstrating how I am different than Kyle. So Kyle, I guess, really, who is this character or this person that we are throughout our life, right? Like how was it created, and how did it come to be, and why do we attach to a particular person, right? And because it feels like scientific, like, oh yes, my consciousness is in this brain, and that's exactly why I feel like I'm existing as a conscious mind inside of Kyle or whatever, my brain. So I guess that could be maybe an explanation. That's maybe one point of view. It's a very, very valid point of view to say that, well, I am Kyle because my mind, my consciousness is in this brain. Because it feels like, because you're not somebody else. But if you think about how do you know you aren't somebody else? That's a really, really interesting question, because it has to do with the fact that like you can tell that they are a person. That might be kind of weird, but how do you tell that anybody is a human being? And how do you know that you are a human being? So like when you look into the mirror, you can watch yourself acting like what we call human beings, right? And you have similar behavior to others that seem to have like, and when you look at their eyes are moving, they're behaving and they're acting, they're eating. You can tell other people have this sense of hunger or thirst, and you sense that you have that feeling too. So it's actually kind of like mimicking, or it would be called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are where you watch somebody behave and you behave very similarly just because you were watching them and you're like mimicking them. So that's called mirror neurons. And I think that's one of the empathetic ways. So empathy, is the idea that you are able to read the emotions of somebody else, but that's because you know a lot about yourself too. So the only way that you know someone is suffering is because you yourself have experienced suffering on many occasions, and so then you know what it's like to suffer. So then you're empathetic. So you put your care towards somebody else because you yourself have suffered. And that's why maybe you feel so sad when you see very sad photos, for example. So that's what I would call probably mutual suffering. Because like, where is that suffering happening? Because some people who would say that like everything is material, right? Like if you study Lawrence Krauss, who says that like who believes that everything that exists as material. So like, what is the mind? The mind is material. What are dreams? The dreams are of a material substance. So that's called materialism. And a lot of people in our society believe in materialism, that everything can be described fundamentally as material, like atoms and molecules and neurons. So like some people say that everything you are experiencing can be explained by neurons. So that's an extremely interesting idea. However, I would say that really our experience, if you're really, really honest with your experience, it is consciousness. It's consciousness first and material second. So it's the sense of I am aware, and I'm aware that I am aware, right? If you think about it, are you aware? And you say yes. And I say, how do you know that you're aware? Because you say, I am aware that I'm aware, right? Like there's existence prior to even you being aware. There's like something that is seeing yourself. So you are watching yourself. So that's how you can kind of justify that you are aware, because you say there's awareness of awareness, or there's consciousness of consciousness. So that gets a little bit technical, but like you know for a fact, like you're aware even when you're dreaming, because something or someone is aware of the dream. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. How do we know that materialism is fundamental? How do we know that everything can be described by neurons and atoms and molecules, when it's pretty obvious that there's like, by being honest in your experience, that there's awareness first. So that's like that black nothing consciousness that I was referring to, which is before we are born, in between our dreams, and possibly, I'm speculating, after we die. That we return to that like peaceful nothingness where there was no problems. And it's like indescribable, because it's more than happiness, right? Because we're very used to having human happiness and human suffering. And that's what makes us empathetic, right? Is the happiness and the suffering. But when you're in this like nothingness that is your essence, really, even right now, it's the black nothingness that is the substrate, which means it's substance, but it's not a substance, right? It's just the fundamental floor of reality, right? Or you could call it God, because God is also known as like the ground of being, the floor of being. That was Paul Tillich who said God is the ground of all being. But it seems like it's nothing, right? But again, it's very aware, and it's fully happy rather than human happy. So it's not dependent on a particular circumstance. So if you think about human happiness, it's dependent on a particular circumstance. Like maybe you get a new motorcycle, or you get accepted to a new job, and that's when you're happy. But if you imagine having zero problems in the first place, which is kind of what it's like when you're in that field of black nothing awareness, where there's absolutely no problem, because there's not even a sense of me here, Kyle, separate from everything else, right? That's the word for that is non-dual, or oneness, or the absolute. So in this absolute that I'm referring to, there is no sense of like me separate from everything else, or like me having to survive against like, or at the odds of everything else, right? Because you want to eat, you want to get married, and you want to have children, and you're really worried about the survival of this person here, right? Of Kyle. or whatever your name is. So that would be a development of kind of figuring out that there's a difference between me and I. So the true I. So again, like, and I guess what I'm saying is this black nothing awareness is here now. It's actually the substance, again, of every moment of your life. So it actually is the moment. It is the moment, because what we see when we use our senses, like when we see lamps and cars and trees and cats and dogs and people, it feels like, first and foremost, that they are physical, that these are physical things. And what is the nature of a thing? A thing is separate from other things, right? So this nature of separateness, but it creates for a lot of ups and downs in life, because when you are focused so much on the separateness of you and the world, you're trying to perpetuate your own existence. And so there's a constant battle, which is kind of the nature of happiness and suffering, which is called samsara. Samsara is it's called the cycle of samsara, is going back and forth between happiness and suffering. And that's the nature of being separate from the world, or separate from the outside, because we're trying to have this one over here exist and continue to live at the expense of other things. So because for example, me, because I think I'm Kyle, I don't want to be something else. I want to continue being Kyle, because I believe that I end when Kyle ends. Because I think I'm Kyle, I think that I end when Kyle ends. That's actually pretty deep if you think about it. But that's the only reason that we're scared of death at all. The only reason that we're scared of death is because we've misconstrued the idea that we are the people, that we are the person, that we are the mind, that we are the thoughts, and the thoughts and the mind and the person, they convince us, like the ego convinces us, the awareness, that we are the ego, and that the ego fears death, because it's the end of itself. So the nature of most like animals and plants and humans, or even ideas, is that they want to continue existing. They want to exist as themselves, as being unique and separate from everything else, and because they believe that they're so great. And that's the same with this the ego that runs my life, right? The ego is convincing itself that I'm something special and that I should continue existing. But there's nothing like rational about that. There's nothing logical about like why. If you study biology, for example, you can see that like at the fundamental level of biology, it's all cells, and it's like very, very similar, and it's all just energy being transferred to cells. So if you imagine like a body, it's just like a bundle of cells. So what makes any one bundle of cells more important than another bundle of cells, right? So like why can't you just transfer the energy in one bundle and then just become a new bundle of cellular energy, right? So it's kind of irrational that like one bundle favors itself over another bundle when it's all basically fundamentally is just cellular energy. It's all energy, and the misconception or the myth is that bundles are separate from other bundles, meaning like cats, dogs, and humans and plants. So that's why I'm saying that the consciousness is even more fundamental than the cellular level. Like the cellular level, the life is existing inside of this conscious nothingness that is here right now. And it's actually the subjective experience. So subjective is the awareness of me. So what is aware of me right now? So it seems like I am me, right? But there's something deeper inside of you somewhere that maybe we can try to find today that is aware of me. So I guess try to get the sense right now, like me. And you might need to maybe close your eyes, or you might need to focus on your breath maybe, Maybe you need to close your ears so that you're not hearing noises, and really get the sense of me, me, right? Okay, so once you kind of figure out maybe where that could be, it's probably not in your legs. It's probably not at the top of your head. It could be. Maybe it's kind of behind your eyes and maybe in between your ears. Maybe the sense of me. It might actually be in your chest as well. The sense of me. It might be right here in your heart. Like me. Like, so if someone says like, I'm going to kill you and or I'm going to shoot you, and you want to protect yourself, what do you protect? You protect me. But where is that in the body, right? Is it in the chest? Is it in the mind, in the head, in the brain? What are you protecting? What are you protecting as the identity of me? And I guess what I'm saying is that it's a sense. Me is a sense. It's like an energy that's somewhere that you can point to kind of in your body maybe, right? But if you're being honest, it feels like there's something more fundamental that's aware of that, that's aware of me. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is like this fundamental awareness is aware of me, and ultimately you are the awareness and not the me, right? Because the me has changed a lot. Being 3 years old, 10 years old, 30 years old, and 65 years old, the me has changed a lot. But what has always remained, what has always been constant, is the awareness, the conscious awareness of just existing, of the me being alive. So what is the awareness of being alive as me? And that's exactly what I'm referring to, is that which has never, whatever has never changed, what has never, ever changed. And it's actually here and now, the sense of here, the sense of now, and the sense of I am aware that I am aware. That sense. Like when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you notice is like, I'm aware of me. I know that I am, right? There's a phrase in the Bible in the Old Testament where God says, I am that I am, which means that I am aware that I am aware, or God is aware of God, or God is aware of the world. God is aware of the universe. So that's how God would like God, the ultimate existent, the existing thing, is fundamental, and whatever is fundamental has to be aware of all of this separateness that we perceive that we are living in. So how do we return to the unity, the oneness, or God that's going to always be there, right? Because me is going to end. Kyle is going to end. Your dog is going to end. So that's just an impermanent part of your life. Even like you're attached to your legs, right? Like I want good, healthy, strong legs. But that's not always going to be the case. You're going to get older and you might lose the functioning in your legs. Same with your arms. You might even lose your memory, right? Maybe when you become 80 or 85, you lose a sense of your memory when you were a kid. And so who are you without your memory? Who are you without a sense of me even? Like if you take a powerful pill, and the pill brings you to this space where there's no me. It's literally just existence, right? Like then the me becomes superfluous and extra, and you don't need the me anymore. It's just like the I, or it exists. It is beingness, isness, here, now. And that's kind of how it feels like when you're in between your dreams or before you were born, right? And that's what's going on exactly here. Like you actually don't need to take that pill to have the sense of not me. And like the me just dissolves, the me goes away. And you may have had this experience in your life before where you say that, like the word totality, right? Totality, you realize like I am totality. Maybe you were scuba diving, maybe you were hiking in the mountains, and like there's this sense of, wow, everything is connected, and like I am the connectedness of life. I'm not the little me, right? Like I can picture myself. I was living in Ecuador, like 3 or 4 years ago. I was hiking up a mountain, and I was like above the clouds. The clouds were like 1,000 feet below me, covering the valley below, and I felt so big, but yet my body felt kind of small. Like this earth is so big, and I feel like I'm not looking at it because it feels like the conscious awareness of earth itself is like what I am. Like I'm not me like there's still a me, but I'm really not just that. It's like I am the mountain, I am the sky, I am the clouds, I am the wind or the oxygen that I'm breathing. It's like you're like identifying with the things that you thought were outside of you, but then you say like, well, I am those as well. Like I am the things that are outside of me. But you see how the language is weird here. Like our language cannot describe, because our language is dual. So our language is based on separateness. So like I say, I see the tree. But how would you? But if you were the tree and the viewer of the tree, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like if you say me, I see the tree, but you are me, you are the tree as well. So then how is it possible that, because aren't they separate? If I see the tree, we would be separate. But then all of a sudden you become the things that, like the objects of your awareness. You become the objects. You become the lamp. You become the cell phone. And that's what's hard. It's kind of easy maybe when you're hiking in the mountains or you're scuba diving to see like, oh, it's all connected. But what if like, you're inside and you're depressed, and you're hungry, and maybe you're suffering, and maybe you're anxious? And then it's really easy to connect with just the anxiety, like me, I am anxious, or I am depressed, or I am hungry. It's easy to stay in that separateness here. And the challenge is to say like, I'm actually the entire scene, I'm the setting, right? Like if you studied literature, the question is, what is the setting, right? And you say, oh, it's 1800s England in a rural place, and you say there's a pond and a mansion, right? I'm saying like that setting, and the setting that has been your entire life, like you are the setting and not the me in essence. But you see how the language doesn't make sense. Like, I am the setting. What? That doesn't, make sense. But you have to even go beyond this idea of making sense, because reality, like deep reality, doesn't make sense. It makes sense to the conscious awareness, but it doesn't make sense to your mind, to the me, the mind of the me, like my mind. It's not going to make sense to my mind. It's meant to be greater or bigger than the mind. The mind is supposed to be very good at keeping my body alive. And it's supposed to be very good at interpreting the environment. So how do I stay alive as me? It's that I'm able to adapt to the environment. Like humans are super good at adapting to the environment. And it's actually very, very fun. And I think the entire process of adaptation, which is actually evolution, right? So if you think of evolution, like why was it created? Why do we need to evolve? What is the point of all of this? Like evolution in life, like what is the point? It's a very, very deep question. But it's all being watched. Like the entire process of evolution is being watched by something greater than your mind. And it's greater than the sum of all of the parts, right? Like if you think about what is the consciousness of an ant colony, or what is the consciousness of a species that existed a long time ago through evolution. Like if you think about all of the species that humans have been, starting about 7 million years ago, you would think that the consciousness is in the brain of all of those past humans. And that's how we perceive history, is like, what is history? History is like the perspective of each of the humans, which is very human-centered. But what if you say, no, like there was only one consciousness in history. There was only one consciousness. And the consciousness was witnessing, watching all of these things that we call humans interacting with each other. But humans interacting with each other, that's only one mind. That's one consciousness. And it's like, but it's so intelligent that it is the sum of the parts, but it's also the whole. So it's like you have to add your consciousness plus your parents' consciousness plus all of the animals that you've ever seen. You have to add them all together. And imagine like there's one brain that is able to capture all of the little consciousnesses that you've ever witnessed in your life, or that you could calculate, like how many humans have ever existed, how many animals have ever existed, how many insects have ever existed, anything that it's like conscious of itself. You would say, okay, let's say a number like 100 trillion life forms with a conscious brain and central nervous system have ever existed. Let's just say that, use that number 100 trillion. So it seems like there's been a 100 trillion consciousnesses. What I'm saying is like, no, there's one. And that one intelligence is creating evolution in every moment. So evolution didn't like just start, it didn't begin like the domino effect, right? Like there was no just like pusher and then now evolution is the domino effect. It's like actually that it's so intelligent that it created evolution at the beginning, but also this intelligence is embedded in the entire process. So it's actually every moment the intelligence is here and creating history. The intelligence that is everywhere. So you can't point to the intelligence in a particular spot or location, because it is the entire thing. It is the entire Earth. It's the entire galaxy. It's the entire universe. And it's the entirety that the universe is happening inside of. So you see how this gets really exciting, because it's like, well, there really is no difference between my essence and the essence of the universe as a whole. Because if you try to find like what you are, like you are a part of this web, but there's no separateness between you and anything else in the web. So because there's no separateness, it's all unity. So it's all one. It's just one big, huge web of existence that we call the universe, or we call all of the possibilities of existence, which could be multi-universes for all that we know. Which probably makes sense if you believe in the concept of infinity, and even that infinity can go infinity times infinity and get a bigger infinity, right? There's these different sets of infinity that humans can't even comprehend the first set of infinity, which is like the counting numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, infinity. Like that's just the first set. But what if you have all of the irrational numbers, right? So irrational numbers are like, I think, I'm not a mathematician, but that would be like 0.12345, 0.12345, and you have all of these decimal points. And there's actually the infinity between 0 and 1 is greater than the infinity from 0 to infinity. So all of the irrational numbers between 0 and 1 is greater than from 0 to infinity. So what does that really mean? Okay, so we think that our body is really complex, right? It's like actually almost infinitely complex. Our body and our brain is so complex, right? But what is our body made up of? Let's just say it's made up of atoms. Okay, so we go to we find one atom that makes up our body. We locate one atom. I'm saying that the atom is infinitely complex as well, and it's actually a deeper infinity than what you are. So it's like, what is a body? It's an infinitely complex organism that is made up of infinitely complex parts. So it's like you have infinity, but it's divided by all of these little mini infinities that are actually more infinite than the whole. So it's pretty absurd. Like the nature of reality is so much bigger than your mind. It's pretty difficult to comprehend with your mind. And that's why you become really grateful and gracious while you're meditating, because you realize, so my consciousness is deeper than my mind. the consciousness of existence. So that's why when you're meditating, you want to try to turn off your mind, right? Because you know that your mind is too logical, your mind is too much in time and space, that the nature of the mind is separateness. The nature of the mind is limitation. But the nature of consciousness is much more irrational and infinite and infinitely possible. Like there are infinite amount of possibilities that your consciousness can create in the now moment, right? Like it's some people can from their conscious awareness, they can travel throughout the solar system, but it's not their body, of course, right? It's people who have harnessed the intuition or the ability to meditate very deeply, and then their consciousness can go in a particular place in the solar system. Like people could maybe travel to the sun or to Mars via their consciousness. But of course, that makes no sense to our concept as a mind and body, because it's like, no, you have to take time and space to get to Mars. And your body would probably die if you were just like floating in space, right? If you were observing Mars from outer space, you would just die. But that's exactly my point, is you aren't your body and you aren't your mind in essence. Once you realize that, there are infinite amount of possibilities that your consciousness can do. And it's not doing, it's actually just being. So the nature of doing is separateness, whereas the nature of being is infinity or infinite amount of possibilities. Okay, and that's what we are, rather than, so we do all of these separate things and fun human things, but then once we calm down the human stuff, the life stuff, the Kyle stuff, the Jennifer stuff, then we just we exist right here. We exist here now, here now. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Who is aware of the breathing? What is aware of the breathing? What is aware of me? What is aware of awareness? What is aware of awareness? What is aware of everything? All right, so this is what I'm saying is being. Okay, so that's a really good, this video is a very good introduction to self-inquiry. So if you want to dive more deeply into these ideas, I would Google search Ramana Maharshi, and I could put a link to his Wikipedia page. Ramana Maharshi was a very enlightened individual. Of course, he was an individual, but then he's also the consciousness. But he's a person who realized he's not just a person. It's basically what enlightenment is like, okay, I'm a person, but I'm much, much more than that. So it's going to the big awareness, the big consciousness that we maybe have been, when we've scuba dived or hiked in the mountains. That's what I'm talking about, the unity, the oneness that we maybe have realized for 5 seconds at some point in our life. That's what I mean by enlightenment or spiritual awakening. And it's possible to have that all of the time, because you know that your consciousness isn't limited by me, the me-ness, the body mind, right? So I'll put a link to Ramana Maharshi. He said that self-inquiry, going into I am, go into the I am. Who's aware of the awareness? Who is aware of who? The who, right? I say who? Me. Okay, well, who is aware of me? Right? Who is it? Who is it? So that's the self-inquiry. So this is a very good introduction. And if you have more questions, you can comment below. If you like the video, click the like button. I want to kind of spread this message of bliss, of true happiness. Because, you know, once you get into the deep I am, that's where the happiness is. It's very fun to be a human, right? And it's awesome. I actually love being a human. But I also realize that sometimes I don't feel human either. I feel bigger than human. So that's what I'm talking about. That's exciting. So there's happiness here, but there's an infinite amount of happiness once you realize that I am consciousness. I am consciousness. I am conscious of consciousness. And so if you have any questions, Just let me know if you like it. Click the like, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Have a good weekend.